Hello guys, in this video I want to show you what kind of mesh issues you may have with your objects, because in most of the cases you may purchase some geometry at the asset store and people who made them didn't thought that this object will be demolished or fragmented. So in most of the cases they are not ready to be fragmented and especially demolished in runtime. And so in this video, I want to show you what kind of issues you may have. And in the second video, I will show you how to fix them using one of the building I got from one of the user. So first of all, I want to mention that there are two types of fragmentation. You can see the runtime and editor. And the reason we have two modes is because runtime fragmentation mode is used by RayFire rigid component because it will fragment your object in runtime, but also you can fragment an editor. So the difference is that runtime mode is very fast because it doesn't perform all the checks and fixes which editor mode performs. So this is why it's so fast, and this is why you can use it in runtime and demolish object in runtime without significant frame per second drop. And editor mode is more robust. It can fragment any kind of object, any kind of issues. The result also will have some issues. It depends on how many problems have your mesh, but it will try to fix some of these issues. That is why it's much slower, and it's not. You shouldn't and cannot actually use it in runtime because it's much slower than runtime. But on the other hand, it's much more robust because in some cases it may fix some problems. So the first issue you need to check is unvalid vertices, and this is one of the issue editor and runtime fragmentation mode can handle. They can fix this for you, but still it is better to be sure that you don't have such vertices unless you actually want them to be there. So this is how it looks in 3ds Max. If I will go to element level, which selects all the connected with each other elements, you can see that I can select every face and then move it. So in this case, you can see that all these vertices are not welded, and you can fix them to this max by selecting all the vertices and hit weld. I can see it says here before 24 and after it's 8 vertices. So now if I will go to element level, it will select all faces, because now it's just one element, all faces connected with each other, and this is what means welded uh, object or welded vertices. And I can select this vertices and you can see it moves for all the polygons here. And this is what you need to be sure, because if you just let me show you how it works in Unity. So here's my not welded object with one-time fragmentation mode, and as you can see, it fragments it without any problems, because just as I said, this is kind of problem we can handle already. But still, it's better to be sure that all the vertices welded, because in some cases you may have unwelded vertices, and editor mode as well can fragment without any problems such object. But this is here's example of also unwelded vertices, but in this case, as you can see here, uh, not all vertices uh, at the same position. So this one, I move this one upper. Again, I can select every triangle separately. But now, if I will try to select all vertices and weld them, only this vertices will be welded, but not these two. Now it says 9 vertices after. And if you will try to fragment this kind of object in Unity, then you will may have problems. With runtime fragmentation mode, it will set you that set and put mesh failed, because in this case it cannot weld all the vertices and create one solid object like this one. So it needs to be sure that your object is connected and there are no not welded vertices like in this example. But if you will try to, so as you can, as I showed you, you cannot fragment it with runtime fragmentation mode. But if you will try to editor fragmentation mode, it will fragment it. But since this object has no volume, because as you can see, it just well, it's not looks like real world object because well, because it hasn't inner volume. It's open. It says open edges. In this case, RayFire will detect that this object has no closed volume, so it will only cut its surface. And in this case, you can see that all the fragments has inner surface, but because it welded all the vertices, in this case, it couldn't weld all the vertices, so it only cut the surface. Because, well, if you try to cut this kind of object, maybe this is what you want to get. It cannot understand what exactly you want, but so for now, this is how it will fragment object with not welded vertices in case it cannot weld all the vertices like with this example. So the next issue you may have is double face. So here's another example. And in this case, I used double face, but I moved it a little bit from the surface. But in this case, I have this double face which overlap with another face. So as you can see, its face. Come on. So you can see it's exactly the same face, but it overlaps at the same position with another face. And again, if you will try to fragment this kind of object with in Unity, so in this example, it doesn't match exactly like with this, like in this case. But again, I will try to fragment it using runtime, and well, it will set here that again, this mesh has some kind of issues, and it will not produce fragments without issues because input mesh also has some problems. And the reason we made it that way because if you input an object with some problems, then the fragments also it can fragment the object, but fragments also will have some problems. So and this is a really bad idea to create fragments with some problems in runtime because in runtime you cannot test these objects and in very rare cases, in our early builds, Unity was crashed when rigid body component was applied to fragments with some issues. So this is why we actually decided to separate these two modes. So for runtime, if it detects that input mesh is not okay and its fragments also may have some problems, it simply uh, refuses you to fragment them. And in this case, I will use editor mode to fragment it. And again, you can see that this time it fragments and it detects that this first object has closed volume, so all fragments also has inner surface. And for this outer face, it simply cuts it. So as you can see, editor mode can handle such problems, but again, in this case, I used one element with closed volume, and second element was just a plane. So first one was fragmented well, and second one was simply cut. But in this case, I have double face, which overlap original face of this solid object, and again, with runtime mode, it detected something wrong and it doesn't let you fragment object. And with editor fragmentation mode, in this case it also fragments it, but in this case it cannot detect that there are two elements and one element has solid volume because in this case this face overlaps. So again, it just cuts the surface of the fragment, and this is one of the problems we will fix in later next builds. But for now, I just want to show you that if you have this kind of problems, like you have object and it hasn't any unveiled vertices, but for some reason you cannot get inner surface, there might be problem with some double face. So uh, just make sure that there are no double face. In one of the video, I will show you how to detect such problems and how to fix them. But now now you know that what may cause such problem. So next problem is open edge. In this case, I have this open edge. As you can see, I can select this element, and this is one solid element. But if I will go to this border, I can select this way, and here you can see this red border, which means that this object has its open edge, which means that object hasn't closed volume, and this is not real object. There is no such object in real world. In real world, all object has closed volume. So in this case, again, let's try to fragment it in Unity. And again, in this case, I will use runtime, and uh, as you can see, it's fragmented, and it fragmented it with inner fragments, with all the inner surface. And the reason why it fragmented, because it fixed it, and because all these edges, they are in flat plane. You can see that uh, it's easy to fix this kind of open edges. So it simply created this surface and then fragmented it. So this is kind of issue we also can fix in runtime fragmentation mode. But as you can see, editor mode doesn't apply this fix, because again, if you try to fragment this kind of object, then maybe this is actually what you want to get. So this is kind of problem we will make optional. This will be optional feature. Do you want to cap all this um, open edges for editor mode, or you want just to cut surface in case you have open edges? But again, just as I said before, for runtime mode, we cannot allow this kind of fragments to be created in runtime, because in some cases, if you will try to apply rigid body component to this kind of object, you may have crash, and you definitely don't want to have crashes in your game. This is why runtime mode, if it can close this open edge, then it close it and then create these fragments. But in this example here, I have not flat open edge but curved. So again, it's basically the same object, but I can select this border. So you can see it's not a flat like in this example. It's not all open edges, they are not laying on the plane. In this case, it's have some curve. It has some angles here. So in this case, if I will try to fragment this kind of object in runtime, again, I will get this set input mesh failed, because for now it cannot cap this kind of open edges. And this is something we will also add some kind of fix in our next builds. We already know how to do this, but it just needs some time. So again, this kind of problems also will be optional in next build. So you will be able to select, do you want to cap open edge and then fragment object, or do you want just cut its surface, like in this example. So again, you can see that editor mode, it can fragment this object, but since it has no volume, it can create this volume on its own. So it simply cut its surface. So these are kind of issues you may have with your mesh, and some of them will be fixed, like in this case, there will be optional way to automatically cap this open edges and then fragment, like with this example. And there also will be fixed this issue with this double face, like in this example. Again, it will be possible to fragment this kind of object. So that was mesh issues, and in next video I will show you how to fix them. So thank you for watching.